Choice of words. Our guest on the phone from Washington is Justin Sink. He's the White House correspondent for The Hill newspaper. Justin, thanks for being here on Arise America. I appreciate that.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, much has been made of this comment that General Dempsey made before the committee, although the president has come out today and more than once said that he would not authorize boots on the ground to go back into Iraq to fight. Is there any chance, because many of the detractors of this administration are saying this signals a possible coming shift in the policy of dealing with ISIS in Iraq and or Syria? Is there a possibility for that?
Well, what the White House has said after these comments kind of came out is that absolutely unequivocally we won't see a return of kind of a full ground troop invasion of Iraq in the way that we saw during the Bush administration, and they said that the president wouldn't even review plans that suggested something like that. At the same time, the White House has said that there are kind of a couple instances where troops on the ground might be in harm's way. One is in a sort of special operations type setting, similar to, there were these American journalists that were executed by ISIS, the group that was responsible for this. There's a rescue mission that was unsuccessful at going into Syria to try to rescue those journalists. So an operation like that could see American soldiers put into harm's way, or some of the Americans who are serving as advisors for the Iraqi military could kind of go into forward operating positions into a battlefield, not to fight, but to advise those Iraqis or call in airstrikes for the U.S. Yeah,
and Justin, to that point, is this a matter of semantics and what words allow what wiggle room? Mr. Obama said deliberately that U.S. combat troops would not be sent in to fight. That doesn't mean that they might not, as you just aptly made the point, might not go in to do other things. A rescue mission could be possible. So has he left himself wiggle room with the terminology?
Yeah, I do think that there's a little bit of wiggle room, but I think that the overriding point that the White House is trying to make is that it's not going to be sort of a large-scale, long troop presence that goes into Iraq, and there's, I think, little public support for that. There's a little support for that within the White House, where the president kind of won election based on his promise to wind down the Iraq War, and so there are kind of some definitive limits based on kind of the scope of such an operation, but there is some wiggle room for the military to operate in Iraq.
Justin, this is your beat. You cover this all the time. What do you make of the fact that the president, both in the past and even today, has said no boots on the ground, no fighting, and then his chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff that does serve at the pleasure of the president then makes what sounds like a contradictory statement? Does that mean that perhaps there is some distance between what the White House wants and what perhaps the Pentagon might think is necessary?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a theory that's been out there, and one that seems to have some credence. There's been, I think, some trouble within the entire administration getting on message on this entire topic. We heard John Kerry earlier this week kind of refuse to call it a war on ISIS, and then the White House quickly after that come out and definitively say it was, and Kerry kind of have to walk those comments back. And so I think the question is whether those comments reveal that the administration isn't entirely on the same page in terms of messaging, or if they're not on the same page in terms of what they think the strategy should be.
Yeah, one would imagine that they're trying to get on the same page now with all this attention. We'll leave it right there for now. Justin Sink, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.